The majority of people who take the SAT fundamentally do not understand how the test works. If you don't know this, there's a really good chance you're scoring lower than you should be. I'm Erika with Target Test Prep, and today we're going to answer the question, how is the SAT scored? With everything you need to know about SAT scoring and the SAT algorithm, along with some of my favorite SAT strategies for maximizing your score. Starting with the basics. As you probably already know, the SAT is scored from 400 to 1600. This total score is derived from adding together the two section scores, one for the math section and one for the reading and writing section, each of which is scored in 10-point increments from 200 to 800. Now, to understand section scoring, you have to understand the test's algorithm. The first module in both math and reading and writing is the same for everyone, with a mix of easy, medium, and hard questions. The second module, however, is not the same for everyone. The second module comes in two different difficulties. An easy second module, which has more easy questions and fewer hard questions than the first module, and a hard second module, which has more hard questions and fewer easy questions than the first module. Because there are still some hard questions in the easy second module and some easy questions in the hard second module, as well as medium questions in both, there is a not insignificant overlap in question composition between the easy and hard modules. We'll come back to that later. This is the important part. Which second module you receive for each section is determined by your performance on the first module of the same section. If you perform worse, you get the easy second module. If you perform better, you get the hard second module. Which second module you receive determines your score band. An easy second module guarantees a measure score on the low end of the scale between 200 and the low to mid 600s, while a hard second module guarantees a measure score on the high end of the scale between the low 400s and 800. Your performance across the section as a whole determines where in each score band you fall. The worse you perform, the lower your score within the limits of the score band. The better you perform, the higher your score within the limits of the score band. So I use the word performance a lot in there. What exactly does that mean? Well, on a simpler test, performance is just how many questions you get right versus how many questions you get wrong. But the SAT isn't simple. While whether or not you get a question right is the main factor in your performance, each question is weighted differently depending on certain characteristics, chief among them the question's difficulty level. The calculation behind this is pretty complicated. And unless you're planning to become a psychometrician like the people who develop these formulas, it isn't worth trying to fully internalize. But the net result is that getting an easy question wrong can be more detrimental to your score than getting a hard question wrong. This means that you may be able to get more questions wrong and get the hard second module and thus the higher score band, provided the questions you get wrong are hard. Conversely, if you get fewer questions wrong, but the questions you get wrong are easy, you may end up with the easy second module and thus the lower score band. This weighting also impacts where you fall within your score band. You may be able to score higher with more wrong hard questions than with fewer wrong easy questions. Now, you may have noticed that there is some amount of overlap between the score ranges for the easy and hard modules in each section, which means technically you can get a lower score with a hard second module than you can with an easy second module. But because of the question composition overlap between the easy and hard second module that we talked about earlier, combined with the differences in weighting inherent in getting more easy versus hard questions, scoring lower with the hard second module than you would have with the easy second module is highly, highly unlikely outside of random chance or a timing disaster. In almost all cases, you can get more questions wrong on the hard second module and still score higher than you would getting fewer questions wrong on the easy second module. So what strategies can we take from this? Well, primarily to do everything in your power to try to get the hard second module. This has the largest impact on your potential score range, as getting an easy second module locks you out of a huge swath of the upper end of the score range. Now, some people think that aiming for a hard second module means practicing exclusively hard questions, but that's not true. The best way to increase your chances of getting a hard second module is to use your study to address the easiest questions you're getting wrong. 1, because they'll be easiest to fix. 2, because getting them right carries more weight in your score. And 3, because you won't see many hard questions in the second module unless you're getting the easy questions in the first module right. All right, let's narrow in a little further and talk about individual questions. There are a lot of ways to get questions wrong. If you submit the wrong answer, you get the question wrong. If you don't submit an answer, you get the question wrong. If you submit an almost correct answer, you get the question wrong. All of these are equivalent. There's no partial credit, there's no penalty for guessing wrong. With that said, there may be a penalty for guessing right. College Board indicates that they consider the probability that the pattern of answers suggests that an individual test taker was guessing in calculating test taker scores. Now, I've seen some speculation on and spurious advice around what this might mean, including that putting the same letter multiple times in a row might indicate that you're guessing, or that spending too little time on a question might indicate that you're guessing. And it's true that College Board has been a little bit cagey about what exactly this means. But thinking about the question weighting model we explored earlier, I would contend that the pattern of answers probably has more to do with which difficulties of questions you've been getting right versus wrong so far in the exam. So if you've been consistently getting medium difficulty questions wrong and then get a random extra hard question right, there's a good chance you were guessing, and the question might not be weighted as heavily. This all leads us to a hierarchy of test-taking strategies. The best strategy is to manage time by focusing on the questions you're likely to get right, and then make educated guesses on the rest. Strategically moving on is one of my 3 tips to improve your score fast for a reason. I talk more about it in that video, as well as how one of my students used it to increase his score by 20 percentile points in 2 weeks. But the net result is that by saving questions you're likely to spin your wheels on until the end of the module, you both maximize the number of questions you get right and decrease the likelihood of getting easy questions wrong due to running out of time. Now, some test takers hesitate to guess on the questions they move on from once they hear about the guessing penalty, but this is actually a huge mistake. Because you've prioritized your time wisely, you're less likely to have missed a bunch of easy questions, which means you're less likely to get hit with the guessing penalty even when you are actually guessing. And even if you do get hit with a penalty, sure, you may not get max points for the question, but it's no worse than not answering and getting none. Educated guessing is particularly powerful. If you guess randomly on a standard 4-answer multiple choice question, you have a 25% chance of getting it right. But if you can eliminate one answer, that goes up to a 33% chance. Another answer, a 50% chance. So process of elimination can be an extremely valuable use of your guessing time. Now, notably, this is not true for student-produced response questions, which make up 25% of the math section. With tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of ways to answer, you have a near 0% chance of guessing the correct answer, with no reward for getting close. So even when guessing, you want to prioritize the questions you're more likely to get right by emphasizing multiple choice over student-produced responses. Now, if you don't manage to perfectly execute the above strategies and end up low on time at the end of a module, guessing randomly with the time you have left is the next best strategy. This decreases the likelihood of getting the questions right and increases the likelihood of getting hit with a guessing penalty if you do manage to pick the correct answer, but it's better than the guarantee of a wrong answer you get with an unanswered question. Leaving a question blank is leaving points on the table, so you should never, never do it. And then before we wrap up the video, I want to zoom back out to section and total scores. Because SAT scores are reported in 10-point increments, a lot of people believe that each of these 10-point increments is equivalent. And if you're just looking at the numbers, they are. But because the distribution of test takers across the score range is roughly a bell curve, with more test takers clustered around the average, 10 points in the middle of the range represents a larger jump in percentile and thus a more meaningful jump in ability than 10 points at the edges of the range. So, for example, a 750 and an 800, which are 50 points apart, are less than 1 percentile point apart on reading and writing, and less than 2 percentile points apart on math. But a 500 and a 550, which are also 50 points apart, are 17 percentile points apart on reading and writing, and 21 percentile points apart on math. This translates to the total score as well. The 100 points between a 1500 and a 1600 represent less than 1 percentile point, whereas the 100 points between a 950 and a 1050 represent 20 percentile points. And this difference in percentile and relative ability is what schools are actually looking at. So takeaway, don't take scores at face value. Percentiles are a far better indicator of performance. You can use them to compare between test or practice test attempts to get a clear view of your improvement, as well as between your scores and the scores of admitted students at relevant programs to see how you stack up. Now, interestingly, SAT section scores are relatively comparable in terms of percentile, with any given score representing a maximum of 3 percentile points difference between math and reading and writing. Because the two sections contribute equally to your total score, focusing on your lower scoring section is often the best move. The points are typically easier to get, represent a higher percentile jump within the section, and give a more balanced score overall, which is something that schools typically desire. That said, you're going to want to consider your specific circumstances. If you're applying directly to an English program, you may want to prioritize your reading and writing score. If you're applying to a school with a reputation for its focus on STEM topics, you may want to prioritize your math score. I'm planning to put out a video in the coming weeks on how to determine what a good SAT score looks like for you and your individual goals, where I'll dig into these ideas further. I'll link that here when it's live. But in the meantime, that's all you need to know about SAT scoring. If you have any questions about anything we talked about today or requests for future videos, leave them in the comments below. And if this video helped you, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.